The Lord just dropped this word in my spirit to share with you all. Stop complaining about God's training. As much as I love Princess Diana, I was a very young child when she was taken out. Let's call it what it is, okay? But I distinctly remember that day. I remember the news. I remember seeing her face flash on the television over and over and over again. As I got a little bit older, you learn to go beyond what media is trying to sell you. Start doing some research on your own and you start uncovering some sources. You start to see the other side of the same story. As much as I loved Princess Diana because I believe she was a disruptor, right, of a type and kind, right? She exposed a lot of things and the powers that be did not like it. It was almost like a royal maverick. But the truth is, Princess Diana really began to disintegrate mentally because she was not trained to be a queen. There are many of you, you have a kingly anointing over your life. And you're trying to figure out why other people can get away with some stuff and you can't. But it's because of where you're going. But that training seems unfair and seems very hard when you're in the season and you're in the process where there's no manifestation of God's promise over your life. Baby, you holding on to dreams and prophecies, okay? They talking about you a millionaire and you got $13 in your bank account. They're saying you about to be a real estate mogul and baby, you live in the hood. You're complaining about a process that many of us have said yes to. Many are called, but few are chosen because that process is twofold. There are people that got calls and some of them never say yes. And there are people that got calls, he chose them and they say yes. And when you say yes, it's not the beginning, but the continuation of the process of the idea God had for you in mind this whole time. Our generation is a little bit delusional, and I'm going to bring it over talking about a kingly anointing. I'm going to start using the terminology queen because most of the people who see my videos, y'all are queens, right? Our generation, I got to say, is a little bit delusional. We're going around calling ourselves queens, and it's because of compensation, especially for Black women, because how we have been treated since the beginning of time. We have constantly gotten the short end of the stick. And then when God really does it for us, humanity gets confused. I'm not sure why. Historically, pick up a Bible and pick up a history book. This generation, a lot of women are calling themselves queens and they truly don't understand what it means. You are not a queen until you are ready to lay down your life and be selfless for other people, not from a place of people pleasing, but from the position of you understand your assignment. The reason why out of all those young women in that region that God chose Esther is because she just wasn't consumed by the title of queen, but she understood the responsibility that came with it. Are you really a queen? A lot of us in the United States of America, we have not had that privilege of understanding what a monarch, how they roll, or understanding royal bloodlines because we have presidents and things like that. So our understanding of it is very limited. When you understand and you've been exposed to that, you realize that you don't really know nothing about kings or queens other than what was written in history books. And what happens is it allows different rumors and perspectives to be said about people you really don't know. One indication that you have a kingly anointing on your life is when people have a lot to say about you and they don't even know you. I'm going to give you an example. Pharisees inside, they ain't like Jesus. And one of the reasons why they really didn't like Jesus, they didn't like how confidently he spoke. That was the thing that irritated them the most. But see, you talk passionate when you are not just, you've had encounters, but when you are an encounter yourself. Jesus is the only one that falls in that category. The encounter was speaking, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they created narratives and said different things about Jesus the Christ, who we know never sinned, was blameless and pure. They said all sorts of manner of things about this man. He said he was casting devils out by the power of Beelzebub. I mean, just shady and salacious. When you have a kingly anointing, people say things about you and they don't even know you. They create a whole narrative in their mind about who they think you are. But meanwhile, they have no idea because the anointing of your life, it will separate you from some people. It's not saying that we're better than anybody else or less than anybody else. We're just different. Our path is just different. Before you fully step into what God has for you, you better know who you are before you step out on that battlefield. You better know who you are until you are put in a position of authority. You better know who you are before you're presented with a possibility to compromise and you stand on business anyways, knowing everybody will be against you, knowing people will have things to say, but because it is the right thing to do and that you've been trained to have integrity, you have been trained to be moral. This isn't new. David was on the backside of the desert. And notice how every single time David got around some people, they had some crazy stuff to say about David. And David wasn't perfect. Do not get me wrong. But remember what his brothers said. They said he had a wicked heart. His brothers. That's why I love God. That's why God had to connect certain narratives. Because I'm sure, how long have they been that conversation about David? How long have they been talking about David like that? That is why when it was time to go and get David, the son that was not acknowledged, they had to stand until he got there. Because God has a funny way of correcting narratives when you put your mouth on people that you shouldn't. But what about Moses? Moses and his siblings were anointed. And Moses was able to do some things and had a relationship with God where everybody should have realized they should have minded their business. That's why Miriam got put out the camp. That's why Aaron got addressed. And Miriam was a prophetess. Aaron was a priest. But Moses' path was different. Moses was raised in royalty. They had a lot to say. They didn't like the fact that Moses also was married to a black lady. They didn't like it. But I'm going to tell you what happened, and they learned today that when they put their mouth on Moses, God stepped into the chat. And Moses had to pray and say, God, please have mercy. It's my sister. It's my siblings. They've been like this since we was kids. Or whenever they reunited, whatever. Don't allow yourself to be in a position where you will let people talk you out and make you miss who you are in God because you don't have the revelation that your training is different. Because there will come a time where people will try to make you second guess who you are. That's like almost like one of the first tests of your calling is identity. Everybody goes through it. All the greats have gone through it. Even Jesus went through it. 40 days. And the devil wants to take you to a high mountain to tempt you. Because you will be presented. I'm telling you, you will be presented with the opportunity to be confused about who you are. I love Acts 28. I love this story about Paul on the island of Malta. I hold that chapter it's a treasure for me. Because here's the truth of the matter. When that snake bit Paul, and after surviving shipwreck, they said, oh, he got to be a murderer. But the truth was this. Paul was a murderer. Once upon a time, he was a Christian killer for real. He was eating Christians for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not literally. I'm symbolism. I'm learning with these videos. People will take things so literal. So sometimes I got to clarify some things. Not literally, guys. Okay. That could have made Paul feel away because he had quite a past. But when God steps into the group chat, it doesn't really matter your backstory. All of it was part of the training process. So I present to you, take into consideration the call of God on your life. And if you know you have a kingly anointing, one of the symptoms, and this is how you know, people are going to say some salacious and crazy stuff about you that ain't even true. I said, but you don't have time to walk with your head down because your crown could slip.